Okay, now I
Are
see
good.
it. Does everyone see it? Did everyone get the okay button? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Just came up.
you. Thank you, Delegate Fair. Thank you. We want to be obviously transparent with what we're doing here, right? Okay, so I'm going to start again briefly. Thank you for your patience and flexibility with this late start to the Local Government and BiCounty Agencies Subcommittee of the Government Labor and Elections Committee. This is a work session only. We are not voting on any of these bills. I appreciate you all being here to discuss them. So first of all, we're going to take up House Bill 732. That is a Baltimore County Code of Public Local Laws bill, the 2025 edition. And Delegate Ebersol, who presented this bill in the standing committee, was not available to discuss it with us today. And so therefore, Pam Casemeyer is here to explain this bill and why the General Assembly needs to take this up for Baltimore County. And with that, Ms. Casemeyer, can you go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Delegate Lehman, and thank you all. It is honestly, in all the many years I've been here, which many of you know have been a lot of years, probably as technical a bill as I've ever seen. So every 10 years, Baltimore County is a charter county. Some of your counties are charter counties, but because the General Assembly enacts laws that apply, Baltimore County has to update its code every 10 years. And then the General Assembly has to acknowledge that they've updated their code. This is exactly the same language that was passed 10 years ago. It basically just acknowledges that the county updated its code in 2015 as it was supposed to. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it's very technical.
Are there any questions from subcommittee members? Delegate Fair.
Yeah, can you explain each and every law that no, I'm joking. I have absolutely no questions. This is wild that this happens. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would agree with you totally, Delegate Fair. I thought it was unusual when it was presented. And I do have one really quick question, which is why is it considered the 2025 edition when we're now in 2026? Just curious.
Because it's every 10 years, but the county updates it and then the General Assembly does it. So the same thing happened in 2016. The 2015 code had been updated, so they get it through that process and then the General Assembly acknowledges it. That's kind of how it works.
So it's just the order of how it happens. Then, of course,
because
in the first 3 months of the year.
Yeah, because in some ways you never know, like in 2020, if it had been done last year and then there was a special session or something weird that happened during the year, then it would have messed up the update. So we update it after we get through 2025, but based on the 2025 laws. So then you approve it in 2026.
Okay, great. Any other questions, concerns, issues? No. Okay, with that, I think that concludes our conversation about this bill. And we are mindful, of course, that we're headed toward crossover, and we will make sure, that we move this legislation along in a timely fashion. And thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a good evening.
You as well.
See you soon.
Always good to see you, Pam. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so we have 2 other bills for discussion. Is Todd Morgan with us? Delegate Morgan?
I'm here.
There's some sign of him. I don't actually see him, but I see his name. Mr. Morgan, Delegate Morgan, are you here?
I'm here. I have no idea why the video is not showing, but I see your smiling face.
Okay, well, I don't see your face, but it's always good to have you, my former colleague on Environment and Transportation. So House Bill 600, St. Mary's County Metropolitan Commission, which is a bill put forward and supported by the St. Mary's County delegation, presented by you several weeks back in GLE. Would you like to tell us briefly the purpose of the bill?
Yes, thank you very much, Delegate Lehman. This is a bill that has been requested by the St. Mary's Metropolitan Commission. It basically asked for some amendment and clarification to current existing policy. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly the details, but Basically, since Metcom operates basically as the only water and sewer provider in St. Mary's County, they sort of have an oligopoly over the situation. And periodically, they come back and ask for clarifications to the code in Comar to make their business able to operate more efficiently and effectively.
Great. And there is also language about bond funding increasing from 25,000 to 250,000.
Yeah, that the purpose behind that is that $25,000 bonding was just too low in today's inflationary times. The 25,000 has been there for years since I've been a county commissioner, and they're just simply trying to streamline it so they don't have to go out and do I hate to say it, do as much work to get the capacity to get bids and things like that to make their life easier, because $25,000 was just too low.
Absolutely, that makes sense. You and I spoke briefly, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was today, the days are all running together. You did tell me that there is no Senate cross-file for this bill, correct?
That is correct. All the St. Mary's County bills go through the delegation chair, which is me. We do not cross-file except on bond bills and things like that.
Got it. Okay. So as I just said to Ms. Casemeyer, we will be mindful of that with crossover coming up. Subcommittee members, do you have any questions about this St. Mary's County local bill? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Okay, no questions. Thank you for being here, Delegate Morgan. We appreciate you.
Thank you, and I will go back to more testimony in my committee.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay, so last bill for discussion is House Bill 1178. That was presented to us just about a week ago by my colleague from Prince George's, Delegate Andrea Harrison. Is Delegate Harrison with us by any chance? I know she had a rather busy afternoon. So I would like to just talk briefly about my conversations with her and Delegate Tolles, the other, the co-sponsor of this bill. And I don't know if you all remember the presentation. What the bill is trying to do is require consent for municipal annexations, 3 types of consent under 3 different scenarios where, first of all, if an annexation is a city is attempting to annex land that is owned by the federal government, that first there would have to be, they cannot do that without obtaining consent. Also, if it's owned by an entity that is exempt from federal income taxes, and one of the municipalities objected to that, saying that it would be any land owned by any other government, but it's specific to nonprofits. And then the third scenario is, and this to me was of the greatest concern as a state lawmaker, because it's something I had never heard about, and I would be open to your comments or your thoughts, all of you. I really want to know what you think of the language. It says, if a city annexes land and that land is in a different state legislative district, that the city would have to get the consent, and I see a lot of hands raised, which I'm glad about. The city would have to get the consent of the delegation that represents the annexed area. Now, I'm going to say one other thing. I think that is a very good idea. I misunderstood that provision to thinking that if a city annexed land in a different legislative district, that it would become automatic that those district lines would, by absorbing that area in a different district, would become part of the district that the city was in. And so I'll use really quickly the example of Laurel, because this is what I can get my mind around. So the city of Laurel is in Prince George's County. And it does frequently annex land. If it were to annex land going down Maryland Route 197 into the unincorporated part of Laurel, the city of Laurel is in State District 21. I represent that area. The South Laurel, the Route 197 corridor, is State District 23. And so that is in a different district entirely with the city of Bowie. So in my mind, I thought if the city of Laurel annexed a neighborhood or two in District 23, it would automatically come into 21. I talked to a county council member about the legislation. He's actually my successor on the county council, and he explained that no, it would not be automatic. That could not happen, but he said, I would be concerned, and I think that this is what Delegate Harrison is getting at, and I think it's legitimate, that it would set up a scenario where with the next redistricting, the municipality that annexed the land would be able to make a very strong case to bring that area or those areas into their legislative district. And that would be very persuasive, and it would probably happen. So he said, I think the consent makes sense. And I agree with that, but I want to hear your thoughts. And so I think first I'm going to go to Delegate Schindler and then Delegate Fair. Go ahead, Delegate Schindler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have grave concerns with this bill for a number of reasons. I'll start with the most recent one that you spoke to, in that I'll use the example of my district, the city of Hagerstown. So District 2B, that I serve, is one for one pretty much with the corporate boundaries of the city of Hagerstown. City of Hagerstown, of course, we don't have the population some of the bigger areas do, but we do occasionally annex. And this essentially would say if the city of Hagerstown wants to annex, they would have to get permission from, I guess, whether it's Delegate Baker in District 2C or 1C, or whether it be Delegates Wyville and Valentine in Districts 2A, before they can annex. And I'll tell you, there's a very adversarial relationship between our city and our county. So we would likely just get told no for no reason anytime, and it would essentially freeze the municipality from ever being able to grow. To grow the tax base.
Okay.
The other thing I would say, if you don't mind, the other piece of this bill where it talks about a state entity owned by the United States, a state or political subdivision without receiving consent. This is something that happened in our municipality while I was on the city council a few years ago. We have an MVA that was contiguous to the city boundary. It was in an unincorporated area of the county. So they wanted to annex an area that was right there, and it included the MVA. So again, that would have probably caused this clause of the bill to trigger as well. I don't think the MVA cared, to be honest with you, whether they were unincorporated or part of the city of Hagerstown. But I have a lot of concerns with this bill.
Okay. And let me ask you something. Those are very valid, and that's what I was looking to hear from members of this subcommittee. What if, and you can think about this, what if the requirement was notification rather than consent? Because I understand that, that could be very difficult, especially under the circumstances you described with this adversarial relationship. But if it was notification, because I am concerned there's a lack of awareness a lot of times with annexation and what that means. I know that there is a trigger for elections when there are properties that are that people already live on. There is a requirement for a referendum vote. So I understand that. But what if it was a notice requirement rather than seeking actual agreement or consent?
I think that a notice would be perfectly fine. It wouldn't, that wouldn't stop any annexation or growth. I think that's a courtesy, really, but
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I do.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I really do value your input, and especially the fact that you are a resident of an incorporated area and have that experience on your city council. So next, I'm going to go to Delegate Fair and then Delegate Schmidt. Go ahead, Delegate Fair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And when I saw Delegate Schindler's hand go up at the same second mine did, I have a feeling like we were about to say the exact same thing. So I won't belabor the point, but to say, as I represent Maryland's second largest city. We can't even get common courtesy from our Frederick County delegation for speed camera enforcement mechanisms in our city. Because it has to go to delegation. So for me, I would have great consternation about the county delegation being able to control and weigh in on what are essentially city decisions that are being made with our county government, and being able to, with this legislation, being able to supersede the interests of the residents of my district, over top of the interests of another legislative district, when they don't seem to really provide any clear guidance on being able to work collaboratively on those issues. And so I would say that I'm pretty uncomfortable. The notification component, I think, Madam Chair, and I could be wrong, is already done when a city annexes, at least in the city of Frederick's situation. They do send a courtesy copy. The city has been growing, as you know, at a very quick rate, and has annexed quite a lot of property over the last couple of years, as it has expanded northward. And so that area causes me a little bit of consternation. And then I'll leave Delegate Schindler's other comments to stand as I echo those concerns as well, for allowing our municipalities to kind of operate fully understanding and appreciating the good delegates' desire to resolve this question of how is the state engaged in these conversations of municipal growth.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Very thoughtful. So you would also have some consternation about what it sounds like you believe would be additional notice requirements, if you think those are sufficient in law, with current annexation rules.
And that would be purely a question. I don't know if we already just do it as a courtesy and it's not in state law, or if it is in state law, maybe Kira can weigh in on that, but I just am not sure. If it's not, then certainly notification as a courtesy is certainly good practice.
Yeah, and we can take a look at that, because I don't know the answer either, Delegate Fair. So thank you for for saying it's not clear, and we should at least look at that further. I will give you an example that was shared with me, because I had two different conversations. One sort of short with Delegate Harrison after she presented the bill, but then we talked in further detail. She and Delegate Tolles and I, and they described, because I asked them what gave rise to this bill, and they said there were a couple of situations in their part of Prince George's, and you all may or may not know that the Prince George's County has the most municipalities of any county in the state. We have 27, and they range from teeny tiny, towns of a couple of hundred people up to like Bowie and College Park and Laurel that have 25 to 50,000 people. And in one instance, a relatively small municipality was attempting to annex county parkland, and even the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning wasn't aware of it at first, and citizens in that area weren't aware of it. And when they became aware, and I'm not even sure how that happened, it wasn't through a traditional form of notice, they really objected to it, and that municipality did back down from that effort. So I think notification is worth taking a closer look at as one possible approach to some of the concerns that Delegates Harrison and Tolles had when they put forward the bill. Delegate Schmidt, I thought I saw your hand raised.
Yes, yes, Chair. Yes, Chair Lehman, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. You were going right down the road I wanted to talk about, which was the notification piece. I think what we might want to look at is timely notification, and maybe offering public hearing, something of that nature. I mean, at least so the public is aware of what's going on. Because I can understand where my two colleagues are coming from. When you represent a city, in a rural county, it's a different it's a different way of looking at things than, say, Prince George's, where the city and the county, may have similar aspects that they're doing together. So just want to kind of throw that out there. If we got to look at timely notification, and then maybe one public hearing within a certain amount of time, 30 days, 45 days, whatever that looks like, to allow the public to weigh in.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I think if I could work with you, I'm talking to our counselor, Miss Baran, or Barron, I'm sorry, but I'm mispronouncing that, Kyra Barron. Thank you for being here. We could take a look at that, and I'm seeing Delegate Crutchfield is here too. I didn't see you earlier, Delegate, so I apologize if you had any questions or comments. But Delegate Schmidt, thank you for raising the issue of not just notification, but timely notification, but also the idea of a public hearing. I'm not saying that would have to happen in every scenario. I don't think that's normal, or is not currently part of annexation rules. However, I would say if that is worth looking at, and I think it is, that at the very least, it should be the case for people whose legislative districts might change. I did see in the testimony the MML was opposed, not surprisingly. I respect that. But interestingly, the only other municipal testimony all came from Prince George's County municipalities. And they and I've tried to reach out to some of them, and I've reached out to the delegates in Prince George's that represent those municipalities that were objecting. One of them, I think, said that they didn't think the bill was clear enough about whether there was a concern about any legislative district changing, or it was too vague. It wasn't clear that it just meant state legislative districts. They wondered about county council and local districts. And the bill, I talked to Delegate Harrison about that. She did not mean for it to go further than state legislative districts. So if we need to, if we're going to move forward with any part of this bill, we would clarify that, so there's no uncertainty around that issue. But I think that's a pretty emotional issue for people if they move legislative districts and what that could mean for them. I just think that should be taken into consideration. It's not to say that it would change the municipality's mind or its plans for trying to annex land, but I think that's something that should be flagged for people. That's just my opinion. I'm one person, but Delegate Crutchfield, did you have any thoughts or questions? We're discussing HB 1178. That is an annexation bill put forward by Delegate Harrison. Delegate Harrison presented it, co-sponsored by Delegate Tolles.
Yeah, I apologize for getting in late. I was waiting, thinking that somebody was going to text us and say we were.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But it's okay.
So sorry.
It's okay. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I just have a couple of thoughts and questions possibly. I heard that there was some thought around just giving notice, because that's what this is really about, right? Is the goal of the legislation all about making sure that all the parties, that this is a transparent annexation, right?
Well, I would say that that's what it should be. It actually goes further, and those are the concerns that were shared by Delegates Schindler and Fair, saying it would make annexation a lot harder. It requires consent from different entities, including state delegates that represent an area where, if it's annexed by a city, it would eventually probably end up in a different legislative district, because the city doing the annexing would make the case for that. Almost certainly would. And I would personally be concerned about a lack of awareness by people, but it does require consent, which Delegates Fair and Schindler, if you want to add to this, I don't mischaracterize, think that would be too onerous. And that would be contentious, because sometimes, there's political, strife, and there's adversarial relationships that would sometimes, folks wouldn't give consent just to be difficult, just because they don't get along. And so then I had asked the question of both of them, and then Delegate Schmidt piped up and said, I think importantly, that maybe this should be more about notification, and specifically timely notification of impacted, areas, people and entities in the areas to be annexed. And so what we were talking about is looking at what existing annexation rules require in the way of notice.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, because right away I can think of the fact that if you are annexed into a municipality, that means, for at least I know in my situation, it has required the fact that I have not only the taxes to pay for the municipality, but also my county taxes. So there's a lot involved with this. So I think they're right in that all the parties that would be affected should have some kind of ability to at least understand and know, and to be able to provide anything that they feel is going to be valuable towards making a decision about the annexation. So I agree with that, definitely.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Any further thoughts? Oh, there's Delegate Harrison. Delegate Harrison, we were talking about the bill. I explained the conversations that you and I and Delegate Tolles had about what sort of gave rise to this. I gave the example of the municipality. I didn't call them out by name. I wasn't even remembering entirely which one that was, but the municipality you and I discussed that tried to annex Maryland National Capital Park and planning property. And sometimes there is a lack of awareness. The very strong concerns that were expressed by delegates Schindler and Fair, or that this would make annexation really onerous when you're talking about consent. I think both of them expressed that very eloquently. If they want to reiterate any of that, but particularly around the one involving where if there it would create a change in the state elected representation for that area, if it would end up where the annexed area would be in a different legislative district, and then the city down the road would make the case they should be part of our district because it just would make life simpler for everyone. And so those are legitimate concerns, I think. And then we talked about maybe we could focus possibly on better notification in different annexation scenarios. But if you want to chime in, please, and just give a little bit of background on some of these scenarios that led you and Delegate Tolles to put in the bill, that would be helpful. And I want to be mindful of people's time as well. So.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you even considering to discuss this further. I'll go into more of what led up to this, but the one thing that I did want to make mention of, I think that under current, because when I came in, you were talking about under current annexation requirements or laws. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's like 20% of the owners in an area that would have to consent to be annexed. And so if you think about you have a municipality and like they want to go over, let's just say one street, and that one street has 10 houses on it, only 2 people can say that they want to be annexed into that municipality. And then the other 8, even if the other 8 says no, then they would be subject to that annexation. And where I live, that was a scenario, or could have been a scenario years ago, actually, when we first moved as a new community. And incidentally, the municipality in which I grew up, my dad was a mayor, council member, etc. I live in the community basically adjacent, and the majority of the people just did not want to be part of that municipality, and it even stands still today. So that I just wanted to say that. I understand Delegate Schindler's concern, because we actually had this conversation last year, and I understand that they're all, even though it's one. I think it's maybe, I'm sorry, I don't remember what the district number is, but I'm just going to say District 2, Legislative District 2, and it's in A, B, and C, and whatever the district number is. So they're all technically different legislative districts, but they still fall under that one area. And I understand that Delegate Schindler represents in his area, that's just what he represents is one municipality. And if they wanted to, if that municipality had a border and it encroached on Legislative District 2B, and I may have the numbers wrong, and so I apologize, Delegate Schindler, but then they would just need to have the consent. That's what this bill says. I guess I can understand the concerns there, but what I will say is that there are some larger concerns that have come up over time, and Prince George's County has 27 municipalities, and municipalities want to grow. They want to expand their tax base, and they have their plans for development, et cetera. I personally don't think that it should be a problem to just have the conversation and then get the consent from the affected parties. When we do redistricting during every 10 years, the districts are set up so that they are approximately equal in population. Maybe not in size, not in geography, but in population. And if we start allowing basically this annexation mid-cycle, it pretty much amounts to redistricting. And then the legislative districts then are out of balance. We've had an issue where municipalities have attempted to annex federal properties, federal lands, the BW Parkway, which is a federal land, and then also I know we talk a lot on the floor about the gerrymandering and how our districts are, I don't want to say contiguous because, you have to be contiguous, but when you want to go, up the highway, around the corner, cross over the river, go through the woods to get to grandma's house to pick up properties. And I'm oversimplifying it, and I don't mean to belittle the intent of municipalities, but that is what has been happening. And I just think that as state legislators, we have the responsibility to make sure that that things are done in decency and in order, for lack of a better term. If you want to annex and you want to go 5 miles down the road and then cross over a major highway and pick up, some other entity, some other area, what harm is it to have that conversation with those who are affected, the legislators, us, and we have the opportunity to say, well, we also know what's going on with these properties, and we have the responsibility to make sure that we are protecting them based on what we know. And then I just think that we have the responsibility to protect lands. Yeah, so I mean, I could probably go on, but the hour is late.
Yeah, no, thank you for all of that. That's a lot to think about, but I think we can continue to have the conversation, with each other. And I wanted to have this because we're not going to be voting on any bills today in any case, but wanted to hear a little bit more beyond the bill, the conversation that you sort of started in the committee last week when you brought the bill. I think there's some interesting ideas here. But where we landed, I think right before you joined us, as I said, was on better notification, timely notification. And then Delegate Schmidt gave voice to something I had just been thinking about, which was, maybe there's even a requirement, especially on the piece where an area could potentially be redistricted at the state level, that there might be a public hearing requirement, because I'm virtually certain that does not exist now. Delegate Schmidt, I'm going to call on you in a minute. I do see your hand is raised. I also want you to know, Delegate Harrison, that I explained to them, because when I read over the opposition testimony, which all came from municipalities in Prince George's, one of them was concerned that the bill was not clear on redistricting and whether that also applied to county level or even local level districts, municipal districts. And so I had talked to you about that, and you made clear, no, you only mean for it to involve state
Yeah.
legislative districts. And
Yes,
so,
because if you're going to, if one of my municipalities wants to do some redistricting that's not necessarily like just picking up the property right next to it, but going, way down the road and turning a corner and picking up, other areas, and it goes over into another legislative district, I believe that those individuals who represent that area need to be aware. And I think that we should all be working together on this. And I don't think that it should just be that the municipalities can just go and grab land, especially if it's not, if it's just right next door. It's a little different with Delegate Schindler's, what the example that we've used with Delegate Schindler. But we've seen some very egregious types of annexation attempts. And if we don't get a hold on this, it's going to be a mess, honestly. And I just believe that we have that responsibility to make sure that we're all working and making sure that things are in order.
thank you. And I hear you loud and clear. It does occur to me, Delegate Harrison, that Prince George's is somewhat unique because we have so many municipalities. Just the sheer number of alone makes it, unique relative to Frederick County or Washington County. And so with that, Delegate Schindler, do you want to respond or bring up another point?
Sure. The only thing I was going to add is I did find the handbook sort of the annexation rules, and there are some components of required hearings. So I just didn't know who would be the most appropriate to send that to give you guys some inspired reading. But it's there is a required hearing with annexation. I remembered that, but I didn't have the specifics to share. But I did find that. So.
I would very much like to take a look at that. And Miss Barron, if she's still with us, I'm sure she is, and I'm just not seeing her. Yeah, that would be useful, I think, for us to maybe look at and see if there's some areas where we could beef up notification and or have a public hearing requirement. I think
So I didn't want to
that would be valuable. Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt, but there is a public notice requirement and a hearing requirement. It's after the proposed annexation resolution. And so it requires the body to do a newspaper publishing 4 times. And then they also have to give time and notice of a hearing to the public.
And is that the entire public, or is it targeted at the area being annexed? Is that clear, or?
I don't think it's clear.
It does have some language. I can send you the full thing.
Yeah.
It does, as far as where the hearing has to take place. I believe the hearing has to take place in the I guess municipality or the area that's being annexed.
And that's also in statute too. That's in 4-406 of the local government article.
Okay, and maybe, and Delegate Schindler and Delegate Fair, since you both live in, I think you live, Delegate Fair, you live in the city of Frederick, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and
our,
Delegate Schindler, yeah, you live
city,
in the city of
and we
Hagerstown.
we represent District 3, and then our city line abuts District 4, and so it's literally growing either east or north would require District 4 to have the consent component to all of this.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking consent for the reasons that Delegate Fair and Delegate Schindler raised might not be realistic, but that maybe it specifies, notice to, separate notice to elected officials, because they could live further, and often do, right? They might live well beyond the area the city is looking to annex and might not just, for that reason, wouldn't have been notified, wouldn't be aware, but it would affect their constituents. And so, maybe we tweak some of those notice requirements, and to Delegate Schindler's point, make sure it is absolutely, or not Delegate Schindler, I'm sorry, Delegate Schmidt, that it's timely, that it doesn't happen after the fact, and that it is targeted. I did not realize that there was a public hearing requirement. I live in an unincorporated part of Laurel, and really only as a former, neighborhood activist in my civic association would I ever know about attempts by the city of Laurel to annex land. But I could see where the people that you would want to know would be missed, especially other elected officials.
And Madam Chair, I don't believe, I apologize. I just wanted to see, Kira, in your comments there, I did not hear you mention that there's a direct notification to state elected officials at any point in the process. Is that correct?
It's Kyra, yes. There's no direct notification required to the legislators, but it's just to the public body, mostly via newspaper, which that's
If
the
you're not, if you ain't reading the newspaper.
And a lot of people don't read. Unfortunately, as a former journalist, it pains me to say a lot of people don't read newspapers anymore. That what used to exist traditionally in most communities, newspapers of record, they've gone by the wayside. If they exist, hardly anyone reads them. So these are things we could certainly look at and consider. And then, that I will be honest, Delegate Harrison, I like the bill overall. I have a different perspective as a resident, long time resident. I grew up in a municipality, but been a 35-year resident of the unincorporated part of Prince George's County. But I also hear loud and clear the concerns of Delegates Fair and Schindler about the political dynamics and these adversarial relationships where folks might just say no just to be difficult. So maybe consent is an unfair, or unrealistic bar to set, but certainly better notice. And I think in particular, this is just me, I'm one person, on the issue of changing people's legislative districts. Again, I learned through talking to my successor on the county council that wouldn't be automatic, but there would surely be the pressure, there would be the expectation that in the next redistricting, that city would press to have that area they annexed become part of that municipality for obvious reasons, for political and related reasons. And that to me is concerning. It's not a scenario I had ever contemplated. So if anything lends itself to a public hearing, I would argue that would. Delegate Crutchfield, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Let me get it. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I guess my other comment is I appreciate what Delegate Schindler and Delegate Fair have brought to this discussion. I just wonder if it does make sense to somehow carve out something special as it comes as we relate to elected officials, because especially if you're talking about annexation of kind of cross-pollination, and the fact that you may be annexing an area that is currently represented by somebody, and there can be some concerns. But I think maybe not, and it doesn't necessarily have to be consent, but it has to be something special, a notice or something to let that elected official at least be aware and possibly weigh into what happens. Because I think, we're starting to talk a little bit, about just sort of the whole I mean, because when you're annexing, you're also sort of redistricting, right? I mean, you're putting people in different legislative districts, possibly, obviously municipalities are changing. So maybe, some other piece of that can be in place as well, so that elected officials are aware and they may be able to also, weigh in on what's happening.
I think there seems to be consensus around that. Delegate Harrison, go ahead.
I just wanted to just in final words, first of all, again, thank you for even considering and having this detailed conversation, because I do believe it's extremely important that we take a look at this and that we, really pay attention to what's going on. We talked a lot about the legislative districts, but I don't want to forget about the federal and state lands as well. And that was the second paragraph in this. I think that, particularly for state-owned land, we are state representatives, and I think that we really should, that as those elected officials, we should really be, we ought to have a say in it. I appreciate the conversation, and I know that we're all trying to come from a good place and make sure that we're adequately representing the people of Maryland. I think that we just need to really pay attention with that. And it's not saying that the individuals cannot do it. It's just the way that the bill is drafted currently, it says you need to have consent, basically buy-in from whomever is affected. And any aggrieved parties ought to be able to weigh in as well. So thank you so much. And I do appreciate you including me in on this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'm going to commit to continuing to have this conversation with my colleagues on the subcommittee and others. I shared with the members of the subcommittee that we had given the opposition testimony from 5 municipalities in Prince George's, that you and I and Delegate Tolles had reached out to our colleagues from the county to ask their thoughts on this. But I think we could raise the bar, at least on notification and engagement of certainly of elected officials. I'm in agreement on that. And with that, I do want to wrap up. I want to be respectful of people's time, but I did see, I think Delegate Fair, did you want to make one final comment? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
I'm thanking everyone for being so engaged and involved. The points you raised, Delegate Schmidt, I do not see him anymore. Delegate Crutchfield, all of you contributed, I think, in very meaningful ways. And so you gave us a lot to think about, and we will continue to talk. And with that, do I need a motion to adjourn, Ms. Barron?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. We are
Second.
adjourned.